When Danielle Harper first met Malcolm Stone, it felt like something out of a Southern romance novel. She was 26, working as a veterinary technician in Charlotte, still recovering from a relationship that had left her questioning her worth. Malcolm was 8 years older, confident, charming, with a quiet strength that made her feel safe. Their first conversation lasted 3 hours over lukewarm coffee, and by the end of it, Danielle knew she wanted to see him again. He made her laugh. He listened, really listened, to her stories, even the boring ones about office drama or dog hair in her lunch. He'd show up outside her apartment with flowers, not the store-bought kind, but ones he picked himself from roadside markets. He cooked. He danced in the kitchen with her. He read the book she loved just to understand her better. 6 months later, he proposed under the string lights of her best friend's backyard. She said yes through tears. They married in the spring, with Carolina jasmine in her hair, and Malcolm whispering vows he wrote himself. "You're my always," he said, voice shaking. "My first and my forever." The first years were magic. They traveled when they could. Savannah, Charleston, the Blue Ridge Parkway. Even when money was tight, Malcolm found ways to make things special. A picnic in the living room. Candlelight when the power went out. Notes tucked into her lunchbox. Their love was loud and bright, the kind that makes people believe in happy endings. Danielle's friends envied her. Even her mother, who never trusted men, once said, "If this one breaks your heart, I'll break his nose." And yet, 10 years into their marriage, the sparkle dulled. Life crept in. The mortgage, work stress, his late nights at the office. Danielle thought it was normal, that this is what happens after a decade. Passion shifts into comfort. Butterflies turn into steady hands. But there were signs, little things. Malcolm, who once never let his phone out of his sight, started turning it face down. He began traveling for work again, even though he hated being away. And when he was home, he was distant, there, but not present. Danielle tried to rationalize. Maybe he was tired. Maybe he was just going through something. But a sliver of unease began to grow. One evening, Malcolm left his laptop open on the kitchen counter while he showered. Danielle wasn't the type to snoop, but something, call it intuition, or maybe fear, pushed her to look. The browser was open to an email draft. "Last night was incredible. I can't stop thinking about you. I hate sneaking around, but I can't let her go just yet." Her blood ran cold. She stared at the screen, hoping it was a misunderstanding, a joke, spam. But the signature was unmistakable. Malcolm. Her legs gave out. She sat on the cold tile floor, the hum of the refrigerator suddenly deafening. Her world, 10 years of marriage, of laughter and promises, shifted under her like sand. She didn't cry. Not right away. Instead, she felt numb. Hollow. When Malcolm stepped out of the bathroom, towel slung around his waist, Danielle looked up at him and asked quietly, "Who is she?" He froze. That's when everything changed. He didn't speak. Not at first. Just stood there, water dripping from his hair, eyes wide like a child caught in a lie. Danielle stood up slowly, her knees trembling. "Say something," she whispered. Malcolm opened his mouth, then closed it. Finally, he muttered, "It's not what you think." A laugh escaped her lips, sharp and bitter. "Really? Because what I think is that my husband of 10 years is sleeping with someone else, that he's writing love letters while I'm cooking dinner, that he's living a second life while pretending to hold mine together." Still, he said nothing. Danielle felt the wave then. the delayed fury rising through her chest, hot and unbearable. "Who is she, Malcolm? A co-worker? Someone from the gym? God, please don't tell me it's someone we know." He looked away. That was her answer. Her mind flashed through faces. Friends, neighbors, even family friends. Every smile, every hug at gatherings now felt poisoned. "I didn't mean for it to happen," he said finally. "How long?" "Danielle, how?" "Long," he sighed. "Almost 2 years. 2 years." While she had planned anniversary getaways, made his favorite meals, sat through his office parties. 2 years of lies woven into the fabric of their life. "Do you love her?" His silence was answer enough. Danielle felt something inside her fracture. Not a dramatic break, not a scream or a crash. Just a quiet snapping, like a thread stretched too far for too long. She walked past him, into the bedroom, and shut the door. She didn't pack, didn't cry, just sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the wall, listening to the sound of Malcolm moving through the house like a stranger. The next morning, she called out sick. She couldn't face the world. Not yet. Malcolm tried to talk, to explain. Said he was confused, that it started as a mistake, but then it got complicated, that he never stopped loving her, but love didn't look like deception. It didn't hide in emails or sleep in 2 beds. Danielle didn't scream or throw things. She just said, "I need time." And for the first time in their marriage, he had nothing to offer in return. Danielle stayed home for the rest of that week. She told her boss she had the flu, which wasn't entirely a lie. Her body ached. Her stomach twisted at random hours, and she couldn't keep food down for days. The betrayal had taken up residence inside her like an illness. She tried to avoid Malcolm, but it was impossible to exist in the same house without crossing paths. He started sleeping in the guest room, but every creak of the floorboards reminded her that he was still there, breathing, eating, existing. Each night, she lay awake, eyes fixed on the ceiling fan as it spun in endless circles. Her mind wouldn't stop. She kept replaying every year, every holiday, every memory that now felt contaminated. Had he been lying even during those sweet moments? Had he kissed her in the morning and texted the other woman at night? On the 4th day, she opened his laptop again. She hadn't planned to. She hated herself for it. But curiosity had teeth, and it gnawed at her relentlessly. There were folders, photos, messages, a fake email account. She scrolled through pictures of them together. Malcolm and the woman, laughing at dinner, kissing on a beach. There was one of them in a hotel bed. She recognized the comforter pattern. It was from their anniversary trip last year, a trip he said he took for work. Danielle closed the laptop, hands shaking. The world spun around her. She leaned over the sink, breathing hard, trying not to scream. That night, she confronted him again. "I saw the pictures," she said, her voice low, controlled. "From our anniversary." Malcolm rubbed his eyes. "I didn't want you to find out like this." "How was I supposed to find out?" she snapped. "With a card, a family announcement. Surprise? I've got a second life?" He looked exhausted. It was never meant to be serious. Danielle laughed bitterly. "You took her to the same hotel we spent our honeymoon in. That seems pretty damn serious." He didn't deny it. He didn't even look ashamed. "You said you loved me," she said. "I do." "No," she said, shaking her head slowly. "You don't cheat on people you love. You don't lie to them for years. You don't bring someone else into your bed and then come home and kiss your wife like nothing happened." Malcolm sat down heavily on the couch, silent. Danielle stood for a long moment, then walked to the bedroom. She pulled out a suitcase and began to pack. Not because she planned to leave just yet, but because it gave her something to control, something to do with her hands. Later that night, she received a message. Not from Malcolm, from the other woman. "Hi, I know this is unexpected, but I think you deserve the truth." Danielle's fingers hovered over the keyboard. She didn't know whether to block her or demand every detail. The woman, Sierra, sent a long message. She claimed she had no idea Malcolm was married when they first met. He told her Danielle had died in a car accident years ago. When she found out the truth months later, she tried to leave him, but he convinced her Danielle was emotionally unstable and controlling, that he stayed only out of obligation. Danielle read the words again and again, her mouth dry. Sierra ended the message with, "I'm sorry. I should have walked away sooner. I didn't want to believe he was capable of such lies. You didn't deserve any of this." Danielle didn't reply. She sat at the kitchen table, staring at the message, and let it all sink in. Malcolm hadn't just betrayed her physically. He'd rewritten her existence to someone else, erased her, turned her into a cautionary tale to justify his own deceit. For the first time in days, she cried, not just tears, but sobs that came from somewhere deep, raw, and ancient. Her body folded into itself, her face pressed against the wood of the table, and the silence of the house wrapped around her like a shroud. She didn't know what would happen next, but she knew one thing with absolute clarity. She would never see Malcolm the same way again. When the sobs finally subsided, Danielle wiped her face with the sleeve of her hoodie. Her eyes were swollen, her throat sore, but something inside had shifted. She wasn't numb anymore. She was furious, not the reckless kind of rage, but focused, icy, quiet. She reread Sierra's message one last time. There were more details now. Sierra explained how Malcolm had spun tales about Danielle being cold, distant, even manipulative, how he painted himself as the victim of a loveless marriage, trapped by guilt and obligation. It was all lies, carefully crafted to buy sympathy, to make Sierra see him as the victim, to make her stay. The next morning, Danielle made coffee but didn't drink it. She poured it into her favorite mug, one Malcolm had given her on their 5th anniversary, but left it untouched on the counter. The smell made her stomach churn. Malcolm walked into the kitchen, freshly shaved, dressed like it was any other Tuesday. She couldn't stand the way he moved through the space like nothing had changed. "We need to talk," he said. Danielle didn't answer right away. She picked up the mug, dumped the coffee, and rinsed it slowly. "I'm filing for separation," she said, still facing the sink. He inhaled sharply. "Can we at least try therapy first?" Her laugh was dry. "Therapy?" "Malcolm, you carried on an affair for 2 years. You lied to my face every day. You rewrote my life for another woman. Therapy doesn't fix that. I made a mistake." "No," she said, turning to face him. "You made 100,000 deliberate choices. A mistake is forgetting a birthday. What you did was a campaign." He sat down at the table, head in his hands. "You're throwing away everything." "I'm not the one who threw it away," she said. "I'm just cleaning up the wreckage." That afternoon, she called a divorce attorney. The woman on the other end of the line had a kind voice and didn't ask too many questions, just gave Danielle the information she needed, step by step. Danielle spent the next few days in a fog of logistics, bills, insurance, accounts, her life reduced to paperwork and passwords, She moved into the guest room. Malcolm stayed in the master. They barely spoke, and yet, every now and then, he would knock on her door. "I still love you," he'd whisper. She never answered. One evening, Danielle went for a walk alone. The neighborhood was quiet, the kind of suburb where people waved from porches and watered lawns in bathrobes. She passed a couple holding hands, probably married 20 years, and something in her chest cracked. She sat on a park bench near the elementary school, watching the sun sink behind the treetops. For a moment, she let herself feel it all. The grief, the betrayal, the guilt for not seeing it sooner, the shame of still missing him, even after everything. A woman sat beside her on the bench, older, with silver hair and soft eyes. "You look like your world just collapsed," the woman said gently. Danielle let out a breath. "Something like that." The woman nodded. "Mine did too, once." They didn't talk more than that, but somehow those words mattered. Danielle realized she wasn't alone. People survived this. Women before her. Women after her. That night, she began to write. She opened her laptop, not to spy or read emails, but to tell her story. Not for anyone else. Just for herself. She wrote about Malcolm, about Sierra, about the hotel, the lies, the moment her world cracked like glass. She wrote until 3 a.m., tears falling silently onto the keyboard. When she read it back the next day, she saw herself more clearly, not as a broken wife, but as a woman beginning again. Days turned into weeks. Malcolm stopped knocking on her door. She heard him pacing at night, heard phone calls whispered through the wall. Once, she heard him crying. She felt nothing. One morning, she walked into the kitchen to find him packing a suitcase. "I'm moving in with my brother for now," he said. "Give you space." Danielle just nodded. At the door, he turned. "I never stopped loving you." She looked at him for a long time. I wish that had been enough. He left without another word. The house felt lighter without him. She spent the rest of the day cleaning, vacuuming, washing sheets, opening all the windows. She lit candles. She rearranged the bookshelves. She played music. And for the first time in weeks, she danced. Alone, barefoot, in the living room. Her heart still ached. But now there was space around the pain. Room for something else. She wasn't healed. Not yet. But she was beginning. That night, after Malcolm left, Danielle sat on the porch wrapped in a blanket, listening to the crickets. The silence felt unfamiliar, but not threatening. She realized how long it had been since she'd heard herself think. She thought about how she had built a life around a man who wasn't who he claimed to be, about all the energy she'd spent loving someone who treated her like a backup plan. And yet, she didn't feel like a fool anymore. She felt like a survivor. Later, she texted her sister, whom she hadn't spoken to in a while. "Would love to visit next weekend. I need some real people in my life." Danielle arrived at her sister's house just before sunset. The sky was streaked with gold and purple, and for a moment, it felt like the world was trying to apologize. Her sister, Rachel, met her at the door with open arms and didn't say a word, just held her. Inside, the house smelled like cinnamon and fresh paint. Rachel had prepared the guest room with fresh sheets, new pillows, and even left a little basket with tea and chocolate. It was the kind of quiet kindness that Danielle hadn't realized she needed. Over dinner, they talked about everything except Malcolm. Danielle asked about Rachel's kids, her new job, the ugly wallpaper she was finally replacing. Rachel didn't push. She just poured wine and let her sister lead. Later that night, as they sat on the back porch wrapped in blankets, Danielle finally broke the silence. "I thought he was my future." Rachel didn't respond right away. She sipped her wine, then said softly, "He was part of your future, but not the whole thing." Danielle looked up at the stars. "I gave him everything, Rach. My best years, my trust, my love, and he threw it away for someone who didn't even know I existed." Rachel reached over and squeezed her hand. "That says more about him than it ever will about you." They sat in silence for a long time. Danielle breathed in the cool air, the smell of pine trees, the distant sound of a dog barking. It felt real, stable. She stayed the weekend. Rachel took her to a local bookstore, then to a pottery class, where they made lopsided mugs and laughed until their cheeks hurt. Danielle had forgotten how good it felt to laugh without pretending. On Sunday evening, as she packed her overnight bag, Rachel handed her a small envelope. "What's this?" Danielle asked. "Just something I wrote. For when the house feels too quiet again." Danielle smiled and tucked it into her bag without opening it. Back in Charlotte, the house felt different. Quieter, yes, but not empty. Danielle walked through each room slowly, taking inventory of what felt like hers and what didn't. She pulled down framed photos from the hallway wall and packed them into a box labeled Past. She changed the bedding, rearranged the living room, donated half the kitchenware. Every little change whispered, "This is mine now." And then came the harder part, her inbox. She hadn't checked her personal email in days. Among the junk and store coupons were 3 messages from Sierra. Danielle hesitated, then opened the most recent. Subject: "I need to tell you something. Body. I'm sorry to message you again. I know I probably shouldn't. But I found something, and I can't keep it to myself. I thought you should see it." Attached was a photo, Malcolm and Sierra, but not recent. It was dated nearly 8 years ago, far earlier than Malcolm had admitted. They were at a wedding. Sierra wore a light blue dress, and Malcolm stood beside her, his hand on the small of her back. Danielle stared at the photo. Her heart didn't race. It didn't shatter. It just sank. He hadn't just cheated for 2 years. He had been living a double life for nearly 8, almost the entirety of their marriage. She closed the laptop and stood up. The floor felt cold beneath her bare feet, but her spine was straight. She wasn't going to cry. Instead, she took out her phone and blocked Malcolm's number, blocked his email, blocked Sierra too. She was done letting ghosts live in her head. Then, she opened the envelope Rachel had given her. Inside was a single page, handwritten. "You are not broken. You are not foolish. You are not unlovable. You are rebuilding. And that's the bravest thing I've ever seen." Danielle held the note to her chest and let out a breath she didn't realize she'd been holding. She still didn't know what came next. But now, she wasn't afraid to find out. Danielle started running again. Not far, not fast, just enough to feel her lungs work, her legs move, her heart beat for herself and no one else. She downloaded an app that tracked her distance. Each completed mile felt like a stitch in the wound, a way to say, "I'm still here." She signed up for a ceramics class. Not the one she went to with Rachel, but a real one, in town, with strangers who didn't know her history. She made bowls that were lopsided and imperfect. She liked them better that way. One evening after class, as she was locking her car, a man from the group waved at her. "Hey," he said, walking over, "you forgot your water bottle." He was tall, maybe in his early 40s, wore paint-splattered jeans and had kind eyes. "Thanks," Danielle said, accepting the bottle. "I'm Theo," he said. "You're Danielle, right?" She nodded. "I liked your blue-glazed bowl," he added. "It looked like ocean waves." Danielle smiled. "That was accidental. The best things usually are." She chuckled, not because it was a brilliant line, but because it felt easy, light, normal. He didn't ask for her number, didn't flirt, just waved goodbye and got into his car. That night, Danielle stood in front of the bathroom mirror, studying herself. Not searching for flaws, just noticing. The curve of her jaw, the strength in her shoulders. The woman looking back wasn't the same one who had knelt on the kitchen floor reading Malcolm's email. And she was glad. That weekend, she visited her parents. She hadn't told them the full story yet. They knew something had gone wrong, but Danielle wasn't ready for the weight of their sorrow. Her father hugged her longer than usual. Her mother made soup and didn't ask questions. Sometimes silence can say, "I'm here, when you're ready." After dinner, Danielle sat on the back porch with her dad. He rocked gently in the old wooden chair he refused to throw out. "Your mom told me," he said softly. "Not everything, but enough." Danielle nodded. "I didn't want to disappoint you." He turned to her. "Sweetheart, you couldn't disappoint me if you tried. You loved someone. That's never shameful." She blinked quickly, trying not to cry. Again. "Besides," he added with a crooked smile, "I never liked the guy." They both laughed. Really laughed. And in that moment, Danielle felt something inside her unlock. Back at home, she did something she had been putting off. She opened the wedding album. She flipped through each page slowly. Not with bitterness, with honesty. That smile was real. That day was real. But it didn't erase what came after. She reached the last page, then closed the album gently and set it on the shelf. Then she picked up a blank journal and wrote on the first page, "This is not the end of my story. It's the start and thus of the one I choose." The next day, at ceramics class, Theo smiled at her again. "Hey," he said, "want to grab coffee after this?" Danielle hesitated, not because she was unsure of him, but because this time, she wanted to be sure of herself. "Yeah," she said finally. "I'd like that." It wasn't a promise. It wasn't a new love story. But it was a moment, a step, a choice. And for now, that was more than enough. The next morning, Danielle found her mother in the kitchen, humming as she sliced peaches for a pie. She poured coffee for both of them and sat down at the table without a word. "I didn't tell you everything," Danielle said quietly. Her mother didn't look up. "You don't have to." "I want to." She told her about Sierra, about the years of deception, about the lies that had spread like mold through the foundation of her marriage. Her mother listened without interrupting, her hands never stopping their gentle work. When Danielle finished, her mother finally met her gaze. "He didn't deserve you," she said softly. "He never did." Danielle felt a lump rise in her throat. Why didn't I see it? Because love blinds us to what we don't want to know. That's not weakness, sweetheart. That's faith. Later that week, when she met Theo for coffee, they talked for over an hour. About silly things. Bad pottery. Favorite breakfast foods. Songs that got stuck in their heads. When she told him she'd been through a divorce recently, he just nodded. "No rush," he said. "Life's better at your own pace." And for the first time, Danielle believed it. Spring came early to Charlotte that year. Dogwoods bloomed along the sidewalks. their petals soft and white like forgiveness. Danielle stood on her porch, barefoot, sipping tea as birds darted across the yard. The house, once filled with shadows, now felt open, lived in. Heron. It had been 6 months since Malcolm left. The papers were signed, the last name returned, the photos boxed and stored in a closet she rarely opened. There were still hard days, moments when a song on the radio caught her off guard, or she passed the restaurant where he first told her he loved her. But they no longer broke her. They reminded her. One morning, she received a letter in the mail, handwritten, no return address. She hesitated, then opened it. Danielle, I don't expect forgiveness. I don't even know why I'm writing. Maybe because you were the only person who ever really knew me, and I ruined that. I'm sorry. I hope you found peace. Malcolm. She stared at the note for a long time, then tore it in half. Not out of rage, out of finality. She didn't need apologies from ghosts. That weekend, she invited Rachel and her nieces over. They baked cookies, made a mess of the kitchen, and danced to old Taylor Swift songs in their socks. Her youngest niece tugged at her hand and said, "Aunt Danny, your house feels happy." Danielle blinked back a tear. "It does, doesn't it?" Later, after everyone had gone, she sat on the couch with her journal, the one she started after everything fell apart. She flipped through the pages. Rage, heartbreak, disbelief, grief, strength. And then she opened to a blank one and wrote, "I have loved deeply. I have hurt deeply. And still, I am here." She closed the book. The next evening, she met Theo again, just for tea. No expectations, no promises. They walked by the river, shoes in hand, feet in the cold water. They didn't talk about their pasts, just books, music, pottery, and strange dreams. He made her laugh. She didn't know where it would go, and that was okay. Some stories don't need a tidy ending. They just need space to keep unfolding. As she watched the river flow past them, Danielle felt a calm she hadn't known in years. Not the peace of forgetting, the peace of surviving, the peace of choosing herself. And for the first time in a long time, she didn't feel like someone healing from a story. She felt like someone writing a new one. After the walk, Theo invited her to a small jazz cafe tucked behind a bookstore. They sat in a quiet corner, sipping spiced chai and listening to a trio play old Coltrane covers. Danielle closed her eyes for a moment and let the music wash over her. She watched Theo from across the table, his fingers tapping the rhythm on his mug, his eyes closed in thought. He wasn't flashy or intense like Malcolm. He didn't try to impress. He just was. And that felt like a gift. "I haven't felt this relaxed in years," she said softly. Theo smiled. "That's the point, isn't it?" They didn't kiss goodnight. He didn't ask to come inside. They just hugged. Long, warm, and simple. As he pulled away, he said, "See you next week." Danielle nodded. "Yeah, I'd like that." When she got home, she lit a candle in the hallway, one of the last ones from the old life. She let it burn out completely, watched the wax melt until nothing remained but the glass. She took her time cleaning it, filled it with soil, and planted a small succulent she'd picked up at the farmer's market earlier that day. It sat on her windowsill now, soaking up sun. Life wasn't perfect, but it was hers, and that was everything. She curled up on the couch with a blanket and a book. The window cracked open just enough to let in the spring breeze. The city breathed around her. Cars, birds, laughter from the neighbor's yard. Danielle whispered to herself, not as a mantra, but as a truth. Some storms don't destroy you. They uncover who you've always been. The journal sat nearby, waiting. But tonight, she didn't need to write. Tonight, she just needed to live. She whispered one last thing before closing her eyes. I made it through. And if this story reminded you of someone you once were, or someone you're still becoming, give it a like. Maybe subscribe. Maybe share it with someone who needs to know. They're not alone. We're still here, and we're healing.